an update, but then also a discussion about the economic blueprint. Edith?
Thank you. Good morning. I apologize I had my camera off. I was trying to put together for you a couple of slides only because it grounds me when I speak, and I appreciate the opportunity today. There's a lot of stuff going on in the city, and I don't know how much time we have to share with you, but certainly, you know, we have a council meeting coming up on the 19th with what we expect to be a very lively conversation on a couple of topics, including a topic that was in front of you recently on traffic calming and the vision for downtown. And that is coming to the council this Wednesday. Also, it is the first of our housing workshops. We have scheduled a number of housing workshops. Brittany, I'm wondering if I can share my screen, and certainly, John, if you, as you think of other updates, what I've put together, kind of on the quick, is a little bit of grounding ourselves on the economic blueprint. I'm not exactly sure, Brittany, where we wanted to take this conversation, but I thought that I would one, do a very quick, very short refresher of the economic blueprint and let you know where we're at and what are the big initiatives coming our way, thinking of things that you may care about and how the chamber may want to engage in this sort of activities.
And Edith, you've got 25 minutes or so.
Thank you. Let's see if this works. I apologize again in advance if this is not perfect, but let's start here. With the economic blueprint, this community came together several years ago to put together a vision for the city. Many cities have what they call economic development strategies. For us, we wanted to have our strategy be, there's a couple of things on the making of this strategy. We wanted to have a short shelf life. We wanted to be tangible. We wanted to be realistic. We wanted it to be doable. And we had a range of 3 to 5 years. What is it that we can actually accomplish? And we spent almost 2 years working with the community to identify the very specific goals that they had. And then we invested time with industry experts, internal and external to the city, to make sure that our strategies were sensible to our economy and where we're at with our market. So we didn't want to just be aspirational. We wanted it to be reachable. So to that end, there were 4 very specific pillars that we identified that spoke to both what the community wanted as well as what we thought we could achieve and make headway on. So one of them is attracting healthcare and growing our medical services diagnostic industry and attracting services for the community. The other one is in the area of tourism, growing leisure, agriculture, wine, hospitality. The other one is retail, continuing to grow our offerings and strengthen our shopping centers. Then the next one is innovation and manufacturing. This is about attracting jobs and industry and being specific and realistic as to how can we continue to grow the jobs, to improve the jobs, but being realistic on where we sit within the Bay Area and the market. So to that end, our economic blueprint identified about 35 very specific action items on how to make progress on those areas. And one of the things that the chamber was very influential when we put together this economic blueprint was to identify economic indicators that would let us know if we're making a dent. How do we know that the economic blueprint is working? At the end of the day, we wanted to identify those things that matter the most for economic development. Are we improving sales tax, property tax, transient occupancy tax, business to business tax? Are we increasing the number of jobs and reducing the number of people that have to leave Morgan Hill to find a good paying job? So why do we do economic development, and what does that translate to? This is just a graphic that kind of shows economic development projects, whether they're commercial or industrial projects, but mostly commercial because they're the ones that generate the revenue, translate into tax dollars for this community. Tax dollars that could be used to pave streets, to create parks, to do whatever services we want to do. This is just a graph that shows what a hotel could yield in terms of police officers versus, say, a big box retailer like a Costco. So that is the value. But again, you can change the value from cops, police officers to streets and linear miles paved. So for us, what we think about is, with the very limited land that we have, what are the choices? What are the best things we can do to support and enhance development in this community? When we look, and don't take this to the bank, this is a little outdated, but when we look at how much vacant land we have, whether it's industrial or commercial property, there is really limited land that is sizable, that can really attract sizable development. So when we were looking, this is years ago, and some of this land is already definitely taken off the market. But when we were looking at 5 acres or larger, there's really only a handful. So with that, the major initiatives currently going on the economic blueprint, let me say, we are, I don't know, maybe somewhere between 85% there as far as completing the initiative, somewhere between 85 to 90 something percent. That aside, we do have some initiatives underway that are somewhat interfacing with the economic blueprint and with our goals for jobs and economic sustainability. One of the ones that you've been somewhat engaged in, and definitely most recently much more engaged, is the whole discussion on industrial preservation. What does that mean as you have projects coming in like Trammell Crow? What are those uses? What does that mean to the community? The other initiative for us is retail concentration. I'm going to talk about industrial preservation in a second, in a deeper dive. The industrial concentration conversation is on our docket to finalize. We haven't. We've had a lot of learning, a lot of studying, a lot of workshops, and conversations with the Planning Commission. The concept here is this: retail, we have always been over retail like many other communities. Retail is continuing and rapidly shrinking. And as the retail continues to shrink and change, what does that mean to our aspirations for our commercial properties? And if there's only so much retail to be had, where do we want it? Because we have seen the Target shopping center sit there with a second phase, fully approved for like a decade, and nothing has happened. We have seen the Madrone Village shopping center behind Pete's Coffee be fully approved for a second phase with nothing being able to develop. And now we as a city just approved recently the Evergreen development on Cochrane. And unfortunately, that project is probably going to have to pivot. So as we as a city continue to approve commercial shopping centers, it starts to water down the rest of the shopping centers. So that's a big policy conversation for us. As I mentioned to you, you are well aware of the downtown traffic calming and the downtown vision, all tied to business recovery efforts. A couple of other sort of like big picture stuff, but somewhat in the neighborhood and definitely touching economic development, is our study on VMT. We have to move away from level of service analysis for projects, and we have to move into vehicles miles traveled, which is very technical stuff that at the end, what it means to some of our projects is that they might be tasked to do full environmental reports, which on one hand, you might think that is absolutely great. On the other hand, it is a barrier to entry for some projects. So that is a big conversation. that if you haven't been tracking it, we've actually spent a lot of time with the Planning Commission on that. We're going to be bringing this to the City Council before the end of the calendar year. The other one is the Monterey Road form-based code, where we are changing the zoning on how we're going to be treating projects along the Monterey corridor to a different approach, which is form-based. Happy to chat about that. And then the next one is the housing element. And I have a couple more slides on the housing stuff. But before I do, let me talk about industrial preservation. So this is the work ahead of us, if I can articulate the different sort of pieces that how we kind of break them up. One, we have this industrial ordinance that has been what I call it, let's think about it as the initiative conversation that we've had for the last couple of years. And this is the no distribution centers in Morgan Hill. The community came together, put the initiative, the city tried to respond immediately and remove distribution centers from the zoning code. That all happened in November. However, the community wasn't quite comfortable enough. And now what we have is what was an urgency ordinance. Now the urgency ordinance essentially prohibits buildings of a certain type. The task ahead is that we need to bring that ordinance to the Planning Commission, massage that ordinance. Either the Planning Commission approves it as is, or we have an opportunity to improve on it. Things that we can improve on, as an example, is the ordinance right now it has very specific limitations on the type of building. But say, my husband used to work for a company called Space Systems L'Oreal. I know, Rick, you've heard this story a million times, so I apologize. But Space Systems L'Oreal is a satellite making company, right? And they have big buildings, big campuses, and they have this ginormous piece of equipment. They called it the pumpkin, and it was like a zero gravity thing. That thing was like 28 feet tall. So I mentioned this because a satellite making company would be fantastic for Morgan Hill, right? As an example. But our current ordinance, the way that we have it, would prohibit a use like that. So the question on the task at hand is, as we bring this forward to the Planning Commission, is there any way that we could massage it so that we can create the opportunity and not have a big stark, no, a certain building with a certain number of dock doors or height could not come in? That's the task at hand. We expect that it's going to be something that we'll tackle over the next 4 to 6 months and bring it back to the City Council. We expect that to still be ending up as an initiative that will be on the ballot. Then the next item related in the neighborhood of a cousin or a parent, I don't know, is the high level industrial policy. And that is more of a, again, high level, what are our goals on industrial preservation? So, say we want to preserve land, our general plan, for example, currently says discourage industrial land conversions. Perhaps the industrial policy says prohibit industrial land conversions. And perhaps the industrial policy also says we as a city do not want distribution centers, right? And we formalize that. So that's work ahead. And then the other one, and this is sort of like this little cousin, but very much in the room, and maybe to some extent at the heart of what we do is the zoning code cleanup. And on the zoning code, and this is also related to the industrial preservation policy, the zoning code identifies what uses are allowed where. So for example, in the context of industrial preservation policy, should we as a city allow the gymnasiums, like the Titan coal situation that happened, uses like that to be allowed with conditional use permits go into heavy industrial or light industrial areas, watering down the industrial parks, creating conflicts between people, community in heavy industrial parks. And that's part of the conversation up ahead. Do we want to create the room for those conditional uses, or do we want to have a hard no, we're going to protect those industrial parks. Related activities. I apologize for this graphic. This is not very attractive, but I was putting it together right now. So related to all this work is outreach, right? So we, city, are going to be collaborating with you, Chamber of Commerce, to do some outreach to the business community on the industrial preservation. What does that look like? How are we going to go about it? Some of us are meeting at the end of the week to talk about that. Marketing. So here we have Trammell Crow building a great industrial park on Butterfield, 500,000 square feet of brand new industrial development. How can we as a city get ourselves in front of the companies we want? So what does that marketing strategy look like? How do we get out there? Related to that, John put together a contract with the Silicon Valley Business Journal to have a focus, very specific conversation in Morgan Hill about the future of Morgan Hill that is coming up this summer. And then also this summer is a 2-day session with the Urban Land Institute, where we are bringing them in to give us 2 full days of training, not only on land use entitlement process, but really being able to think through what does a developer go through? What does an elected official go through when reviewing projects? We are bringing them here, and we're going to open it up to some folks in the community to come in and join us, where we, the city, will host you. So this is going to be an opportunity for you guys, for those of you that have the ability, the interest to spend 2 days doing a deep dive on that. I think that on the economic blueprint, I'm generally done. I think that I wanted to just share a couple more slides related to the general fund and housing. As you know, land use is completely tied to our general fund. Some lands generate more revenue. Some lands in the long run cost more revenue to the city. Housing generates revenue for the city, but yet at the same time, housing requires more services than industrial and commercial, more parks, more schools, more libraries, so on and so forth. So in the long run, housing is more costly to the city. So for us, we need to be mindful that Morgan Hill, if you didn't see the news, and as we know, because we're feeling the growing pains, Morgan Hill is one of the fastest growing cities in California, one of the fastest growing cities in the Bay Area. Our housing stock is growing faster than we're growing jobs. So the disparity of jobs and housing is going to be, and is getting, and might be getting bigger. Ideally, as a community, you want to have one job available for every person that is able to work in your community. Ideally, you want to have a 1-to-1 ratio. We haven't had a 1-to-1 ratio, I don't know if ever, but we certainly don't right now. But that is one of the things that we're tracking in the economic blueprint. Another thing that we're worried about that is coming to us is that, as there has been previous legislation that didn't make it through, but this round is continuing to advance, potential legislation that allows housing to go in commercial lands. So again, if we think for the city, if we think of industrial lands and commercial lands as our revenue for the city, as our future retirement for the city to pay for services, cops, streets, lights, so on and so forth, we need to be very mindful of that balance and making sure that we can capitalize on those lands. And if all of a sudden commercial lands go away and go to housing, what does that do to our long-term economic sustainability? And again, as I said, we have diminishing industrial land, so we have the policy coming up on how to protect those. And housing workshops, if you want to do a deep dive on housing, we have scheduled a number of workshops for May and June. Another final thing, somewhat related, that you may care about is our side of the house that does development services has always had this line. You're not supposed to make sense of the line. It's just to make a point. It's always like this. And part of it is by design. We as a city, we don't charge for people coming in and asking questions at the counter. We pride ourselves in our customer service, and those costs we just absorb as part of the general fund. But we have been, if it hasn't been known, we have been reducing staff in planning. After COVID, and even before that, there was quite a bit of reduction across the board. All of our contract services went away, and we are putting together a user fee study. This is where we charge developers for coming in and doing business with the city. We're in the process of updating our user fee study, and we expect that the numbers are going to go up significantly. And that concludes my presentation. Happy to share and happy to get into any questions. And John, is there anything that I missed that I should have mentioned?
I think you got it covered for what you're trying to solve for today.
Okay, we had John McKay had to pull off and go to another meeting. He did have a couple of questions. His first question was, we will be having a discussion about equity in our community. This includes jobs. Do we want all high-paying jobs, or do we want to consider jobs for all? So do we have enough jobs for unskilled, lower paying, and just need to add the higher paying jobs, or do we need to include all of them in the conversation?
That is an excellent question. It feels like a little bit of a white glove smack for my comment on, we need to attract the good, higher paying jobs. It's an excellent question. The community comes up to and shows up at community meetings saying like, but these are the jobs we want. We want the higher paying jobs. And we from economic development try to convey the message that John is saying, which is we need jobs at all spectrum. For everybody. Not everybody in this community is able to get the six-figure dollar jobs, and absolutely. We are starting in June, hopefully June 2nd, we're going to be going to the City Council with a diversity, equity, inclusion conversation as the beginning conversation for us and the City Council to set up the framework for what that looks like here in Morgan Hill.
Okay, John's second question was, we have SB 6 moving through the state legislature. Do we want to look at pre-zoning some particularly vulnerable commercial lots to make sure they look like we want, what they look like what we want if conversion takes place? You might give us a little bit of background about SB 6 and what kind of conversion is he talking about?
I'm not exactly sure. I have to look it up, and maybe John, you can help me look it up. But I think it's again, we do have a couple of legislative items going forward that are going to be threatening our commercial lands. So let's put a pin on that, Rick. What else do you have?
Well, I guess a couple of questions that I had. You mentioned Evergreen pivoting a little bit. What kind of uses are not going to be taken advantage of there? What's the pivot look like?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. All I know is that a lot of those contracts that were under contract, transactions, they were transacting at different levels have fallen and or are on ice. The retail industry, and Larry might be able to chime in. I mean, he's part of the retailers organization. There's a lot of shifting with financing right now. There's a lot of adjusting, and we expect. I mean, we just had a meeting with Christine Furstenberg, our retail consultant. She made a comment last week that kind of left me a little cold. She said, we expect some of your retail spots to go dark, some of the retail units. And by that, she means the bigger ones, the name brand ones.
Anybody else have any questions for Edith or John? So I guess just real quick, I'll fill in a couple. The hotel downtown, when's that going to resume its construction?
Excellent question. It keeps on coming up. I guess I don't track social media for my own mental health, so, but I guess that it's been out there. So this is what I know. I can tell you what we have heard from Frank Leal, specifically from him. But I can tell you also that I was several weeks ago, I was just on the phone with our hotel consultant that assisted us several years back. I was asking him that same question. How do we get financing for hotels? And he gave me it's going to be more than 2 years before hotel financing opens up. And boutique hotel financing is even more challenging. So I was hoping that he was going to say by end of the year, we were going to see that open up. But the reality is that the hotel hospitality industry has probably been hit the hardest than any other industry. And you see their occupancy, you see how far behind they are. It's going to be a while before that absorbs. And the other challenge is, related to that is the office industry. The office is not necessarily quite coming back. Everybody's Zooming. So the travel is not quite coming back. And we are part of our market here. We haven't grown the tourism market here enough to really lean on that. We are more like spillover from San Jose market workforce. So we do have some workforce that occupies this here. And Brittany is nodding her head as she also came from the industry, has a lot of intimate knowledge on that. So unfortunately, our hotel consultant says it's going to be more than 2 years before the lending markets open up. I know that Frank has conveyed to us he is very, very interested in trying to get this up and running as soon as possible. The cost continues to go up every year for him.
Okay. I see we have a couple other hands raised. Armando?
Yes, thank you, Rick. Good morning, Edith. I have a question on the conditional use permit.
Mm-hmm.
And that what I see out there as light manufacturing and engineering office space is considered industrial. Are you considering somewhat talking about rezoning, maybe not rezoning it, but consideration on a conditional use permit, whether it's light manufacturing facility like Titan went in? I don't consider that industrial. Maybe I have a different picture of industrial. Being an old guy now, I look at industrial factories and I don't see that there. So is it a parking issue? So what is the reason for not allowing places like gyms? Because it's very difficult to reach a break-even point in a retail section with these gyms and fitness studios.
I'm about to get in trouble when I answer that question, Armando. I think you're absolutely right. At the heart of it, at Titan, I'm just using it because it's a name that we know, but any gymnasium, or forget the gymnasium, let's think about Voices Charter School as an example. Any use that is commercial, like a gymnasium, recreational, educational, going into the industrial zone that is supposed to be manufacturing, is supposed to be factories, it takes away. And you're absolutely right. People go into the industrial zones because they're cheaper. They're more affordable. They have big buildings. And it's not that that gymnasium couldn't have gone to another building that is rightly zoned. It's just that the cost to improve that building, it would have been cost prohibitive for that particular business. So yeah, there's always going to be pressure to go into industrial, to have non-industrial uses go into industrial because of the affordability and the building stock.
Okay, I see Larry has his hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Rick. This morning's conversation, for me, I hear Edith and John laying out what could be an agenda for this committee and taking a look at these different topics. I know we always have questions for John and Edith about, what's coming, why this fence, what's going on with that. But I think there's broader things that we could be talking about and trying to help the community and help the city in making some decisions and positioning ourselves. The governor's going on a statewide tour right now to talk about $100 billion, almost $100 billion surplus, and all the candy he's going to hand out as a result of that across the state, and build back better. And but what does build back better mean for Morgan Hill? If we really open up on June 15th, that's awesome. And Steve's got schools back in, and they're going to be back in full force in the fall. But what does it mean in 2 years for us? What does it mean in 5 years for us? How do we get the jobs housing balance back on track with where we were trying to get to before COVID? How do we understand the implications of a pivot from a retail development at a significant corner? And what does that mean if a construction fence is sitting up for 2 years and nothing goes on beyond those fences? And what does it mean for our community? And these are sort of broad topics that it seems like we could spend a lot of time, and I don't want to spend a lot of time, but that we could put some significant time into these conversations and really trying to help move a discussion forward if we want to really put an agenda together talking about some of these things that are really could be transformational about our community in the out years, not just what's going to happen with the next building site or the next permit that's pulled. So I'm not sure exactly what I'm suggesting, but perhaps that maybe there's an opportunity for leadership of this committee and of the chamber to say, can we maybe focus these conversations in this EDC into that kind of a conversation, and less about the next shiny thing that's coming down the road. So
yeah, I think
that's a question.
It's a needed conversation, and obviously tomorrow morning I think we're going to expand on that a bit with Edith and the city. I've got a bunch more questions, but I'll hang on to those. I do see David has his hand up.
Right. Thank you. Hopefully you can hear me okay.
Yeah.
Just one question. Here in the valley, we're seeing some industrial impacts due to the cannabis industry moving into the lower grade industrial, which is forcing those users that would usually use that building stock to move up. Is that something that's happening in Morgan Hill also?
It's not allowed in Morgan Hill. The council recently revisited the cannabis conversation and voted not to open up that industry.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Edith and John, for your time. Great presentation, and I think a conversation that needs to continue. Let's